Good Yontif, first of all. Very Yem Segula.
20-30 seconds.
20-30 seconds. Okay, Good Yontif, everyone. Pesachim b'chvei d'chsanya. This is a very special meisid. It's miyached, the Shnei Eres, Nigla, Chassidus, and in Nigla itself is Halacha l'maisa, Havai Itai, Halacha k'meisei. So it's a privilege for me to be able to speak and give a little over some divrei halacha with regard to a question that has been raised by Pesachim of this time and also by Rabbani Anash, and there are chalukei deis about this. And I'm not going to paskin, of course, but I'm just going to tell you what I think, Lefi ani yazdaiti, about the question of making a bracha on lighting the menorah in Mekaymes Tziburim, in public menorahs, where the Rebbe encouraged us to put up these menorahs all over the world. Do you make a bracha? What is it based on? It starts with, of course, the whole halacha of Bati Knesiyos, that we're supposed to light the menorah in a shul, in addition to what we light in our own homes, and that's a makom tzibur. So the question is, does that extend, and we make a bracha, does that extend to every public place? The Mechaber in Siman Tafresh Ayin Aleph, I wrote about this many years ago, and I have it published in a sefer, so I'm going to be reminding myself of what I wrote. Kasha Atika Mechadata, so you'll have to bear with me. The Mechaber in Tafresh Ayin Aleph, Siv Zayin, Umadlikim Umevarchim Bebeis HaKnesses, Mishum Persum Nisa. So the Mechaber makes it clear that we make not only light in the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses, we also make the bracha. The Rama is meisiv ve'ein adam yetzer b'nerah shel Beis HaKnesses. B'tzarech lachzer lahadlika b'beisein. You can't be yetzer with those nerahs. You have to, even after you lit the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses, you have to light the menorah back at home. So the question is, does this extend to other places where the Yidden gather in a makom tziburi, in a public arena? Does it also apply to make the bracha on the Neiros Chanukah? So, as many poskim and many who wrote about this write that it depends on what the reason is why we light the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses. And everyone comes up with 3 or 4 or 5 reasons given by Rishonim. I think there are 6 reasons. I think some of the reasons, they sound similar, but they're actually different. So we'll go through all the 6 reasons, B'kitzer, and see how it applies to this shaila. So the first reason, written by the Kolbe is one of the Rishonim. We don't know who the Mechaber is. Some people say it's the Rivash, but it couldn't be the Rivash because the Rivash disagrees with the Kolbe about this. But there's also a sefer called Archas Chaim, and they say that the Archas Chaim and the Kolbe are written by the same person. One is a kitzer of the other. And they say essentially the same thing. This is the lashon of the Kolbe in Hilchas Chanukah. V'nogu kol ha'makaymes. This is a universal minig. Lahadlik ner Chanukah bebeis haknesses, laheitzi mi she'ene baki b'she'ene zariz. And the Archas Chaim says a similar lashon. V'nogu lahadlik ner Chanukah bebeis haknesses, laheitzi mi she'ene baki b'she'ene zariz b'zeis hamitzvah. In other words, there are people who don't know how to make the bracha, don't know how to light, they don't know how to make them. It's hard to say they don't know how to light. It's not very hard to light. To be Mekayim the Ikar HaMitzvah, not the Mahadr Min HaMahadr necessarily, but they certainly don't know how to make the bracha, and some people don't care and not conscientious, so they were masakin to light the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses to be meitzi all those people who are not baki and not zariz. So it's clear from the Kolbei that your yetzer, the mitzvah of Halakas Neiros Chanukah, so why would it be any different in a makom tzibur? If lighting in a Beis HaKnesses is an...
This is Rama, right?
What?
This is Rama.
Oh, okay, well, let's talk about the Rama. That's the obvious next step. But the Kolbe makes it very clear that you mekayim the mitzvah of Halakas Neiros Chanukah by a public menorah lighting, and there's no reason to distinguish between a Beis HaKnesses and any other place. However, the problem is, and this is what the Paskim, the Rabbi Vosner in Shevet HaLevi says, but you have to deal with the Rama. Yanei Yisrael Yitzim B'yad Rama. What does it say in the Rama? Ve'ein adam Yitzim B'ner Shal Beis HaKnesses Tzarech Lachzor L'Hadlik B'Beisei. So according to the Rama, this reason doesn't apply to any Makom Tzibur. So you have to say in the Beis HaKnesses there was a special takana for reasons that we might find a little later, but there was a special takana by Beis HaKnesses. But in other places, there's no reason to light. So and you're not Yitzah, so what's the point in lighting if you go by the Kol Beis reasoning? I don't think that you can necessarily be medayik from the Rama that he holds they're not Yitzah. Even though the Rama says clearly, Ve'ein adam Yitzah b'ner shel Beis HaKnesses. Why does he add the words V'tzarech lachzor l'hadlik b'beisei? It's enough. If you're not Yitzah, obviously you have to light in b'beisei. I think what the Rama is trying to say, and even if it's a little deichik, Ein Adam Yaitze B'ner Shal Beis HaKnesses. He makes it very clear. B'tzarech lachzor l'hadlik b'beisei. What the Rama is saying is not that you can't be Yaitze. You're not supposed to be Yaitze with the hadlaka in the Beis HaKnesses. Why? Because tzarech lachzor l'hadlik b'beisei, because there's a din that you're supposed to light in your house. And the Bir Hagra, he's meramis the two reasons why you have to not be Yaitze, why you have to do it in your house. Number one, chshad. There's a halacha that if you have two entrances, when they used to light by the Pesach Beis HaMibachutz, you couldn't light in one Pesach and not the other because people going by would be chayshid that you didn't light the menorah. So you have to light. If you have a house, you can't just say, I was Yaitze in shul. You have a house, and people will go by, they'll see that there's no menorah there. And then the second part is that you have to light in your house. So what is the Gra trying to say? He's trying to explain the Rama. He's trying to say, why is it that you shouldn't be Yaitze in the Beis HaKnesses? Because anyhow, you have to tzarech lachzor l'hadlik b'beisei. You have to light in your house, either because of chshad or because the ikar takana of Neres Chanukah is b'beisei. Be'emes, there's a machlekes, the Achreinim talk about it, and the Rishonim talk about it, is the mitzvah of halakas ner Chanukah on the gavra, or is it on the bayis? And I'm not going to go through all the different sources, but they bring rayis lakan or lakan. So, if you hold that you have to light in your bayis, that's a chiyuv on the bayis, then what good is it if you're Yaitze, you can't be Yaitze from lighting in the Beis HaKnesses. But most poskim hold that the chiyuv of Neres Chanukah is not only on the bayis, it's also a chiyuv gavra. And of all the poskim that talk about it, the Rama is the most clear. The Rama in Simin Tafresh Ayin Zayin Sif Gimel, the Mechaber talks about Afal Pisha Madlikin Olav B'Teir Beisai. If you're in a place V'Makim She'ein Bei Yisrael Madlik B'Brachos, the Mechaber says, and the Rama adds Ki Chayiv Liris Haneris, and the Rama concludes Shekein Ne'agin V'Afilim Hu Eitzel Yehudim V'Reya Haneris Im Reitzel Lahachmer Al Atzmai U'Lahadlik B'Fnei Atzmai Madlik M'Varach Aleim B'Chein Ne'agin. In other words, according to the Rama, you can light the menorah even if the madlik b'teich beisei. So you're not being mekayim the mitzvah of ner ishu beisei and doing it in your home. And yet the Rama holds that you're yaitza with you could be madlik the menorah and make a bracha. You're yaitza with the hadlakas haneris outside of your home. That means that the Rama holds that even though obviously mitzvah and a muvchar to light in your home, but it is a chiyuv gavra. So if the Rama holds it's a chiyuv gavra, then why can't you be Yaitze with the menorahs in the public place? The answer is, you could be Yaitze, but you shouldn't be Yaitze. Why? Because anyhow, there's a hiddur to do it in your house. Even though it's not miyakiv, you can do it any place, and many poskim say, what happens if you're traveling by train, you're going by plane, you're in the airport, and we light the menorah there. It's not in your house, and that's how most poskim bisman hazeh. So and the Rama clearly holds like that. So if the Rama holds like that, why can't you be Yaitze with the lighting of the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses? So I think that there's no stira from the Rama to the Kol Beis reasoning that the reason why we light in the Beis HaKnesses is to be Yaitze misha ein baki v'shein zaris, and by extension it would apply to any public place. Why not? There are many people who are not zaris and not baki, bizman hazeh, even more than ever before. It's interesting, the Minchas Elazar doesn't understand the kolba. He says, we make a takana lepeishim. Minchas Elazar was a big kana. He says the peishim, they don't care about menorah, lighting the menorah. They're not zaris, they're not baki, and we're going to make a takana for them, so to be made to them. But the kolba says that. But it's not that they made a takana for them. The pale, there are yidden who don't know how to light the menorah. They don't know how to make the bracha. And the minhag became that they were yaitz in the Beis HaKnesses, so why not in any other public place? So, reason number one, the kolbei's reason, is that it's to be maitz and misha ein baki, and that would apply to any place where the menorah is lit, and even if it's not in the Beis HaKnesses. So I don't think there's a stira from the Rama to the tam of the kolbei. Then there's the tam of the Beis Yosef, not the Mechaber. Mechaber gives a reason because of Pesum and Nisa, we'll soon see about that. But in the Beis Yosef itself, the Beis Yosef writes, Shetiknu kain b'pnei ha'archin, she'ein lehem bayis lahadlik bay, k'mei shetiknu kiddush b'beis HaKnesses, mishum archim, da'achlu v'shasa b'bei kanishta. Shabbos, there's a takana, because of archim and shul, that they make kiddush. In the days when people used to sleep in the shul, they would make kiddush for everyone. And the shaila is, this takana still lasts today when the minig is not to sleep in the shul. We'll soon see about that. But the Mechaber says the same thing over here. There's also a takana that we should light the menorah for those people who are in the shul and don't have a house. But that's a different reason from the kolbei. The kolbei says the reason is because to be ma'itz mishain the baki mishain the zaris. And Beis Yosef says for the archim. But then the Beis Yosef throws in a monkey wrench. The Beis Yosef says for kach kosav kolbei. So the question is, what do you mean? That's not the same reason as the kolbei. So the Mefarshim, the Steichemet, and others say he doesn't mean that the reason of the Beis Yosef, Mishum Archin, is the same reason as the kolbei. What he means is that the din of lighting the menorah in a Beis HaKnesses, which originates with a kolbei, Beis Yosef agrees with that. Not the reason. The reason is taka different. But then I saw this the sefer from the Dayan Raskin, the Sivos, what does he call it? The Sivos B'stei Shlichus. He brings from a sefer Shari Halacha. I didn't see it recently. I don't know who's the mechaber of the Shari Halacha. What? In the back of the Nayams. It could be. Anyhow, he says over there that he tries to be metavach, that the Beis Yosef and the kolbei are saying the same thing, that the Beis Yosef is mefarish the kolbei, that the archim are not bikiyim, and the kolbei was only matir to make the bracha only when you're talking about archim who are light in the place where they live. Temporarily, they live in the shul. But even the kolbei would agree that if you're not in the shul, you don't make the. I think it's so forced to say a thing like that the kolbei and the Beis Yosef are saying the same thing. If the Beis Yosef, if the kolbei wanted to say that the archim are not bikiyim, he should have said that. Mipnei ha'archim she'enim bikiyim. Why does he just talk about eini baki, eini zaris? He doesn't mention a word about archim. So it's clear, as most mechabrim who talk about this, that the kolbei and the Beis Yosef are two separate reasons. And the Beis Yosef himself, when it comes to Shabbos, in Hilchas Shabbos, the Beis Yosef says, nowadays we do not make Kiddush in the shul. There's a big machlekes if it's still in Bizman Hazeh. And the Beis Yosef writes in Hilchas Shabbos, Siman Reish Samach Tes, after he brings the shitas that say that even after Shenis Batal Hatam, Shal Takana, that the Takana still remains, so he's Masik in Be'eretz Yisrael, Nogo Shaloi L'Kadosh Beis HaKnesses, V'hu HaNachain. And also in Shulchan Aruch he paskins that we shouldn't make a Kiddush in the Beis HaKnesses. So l'cher it's a stira to what he says over here, that Tiknu came b'pnei ha'archin. So I think be'emes, that's why the Beis Yosef, the Mechaber, in Shulchan Aruch doesn't give that reason of archim. He says Pesum Nisa, because even though l'chatchila that's what the Beis Yosef wrote, but he later on paskined, or maybe before he paskined Hilchas Shabbos, that the takana of Archin was nisbatal. So that reason doesn't apply. But at any rate, what?
This reason that you said for
the Archin is the Beis Yosef. Yeah.
Mechaber brings different reason.
The Mechaber doesn't bring that reason. The reason of Archim he brings in the Beis Yosef on the Tur. In the Shulchan Aruch itself, he brings the reason Mishum Pesum Menisa. Why doesn't he bring the reason that he brings in the Beis Yosef? Because that reason doesn't even apply anymore. If you take that reason, then obviously you don't make a bracha in any other place outside the shul, because the takana was Archin who sleep in the shul. So according to the Kolbe's reason, you would make the bracha in a Makom Tzibur. According to the Beis Yosef's reason, whether the Beis Yosef holds like that in the Maskana or not, but according to that reason, you wouldn't make a bracha. Okay, so it's 1 for 1 so far. One reason dictate you do make the bracha, and one would dictate you don't. Then there's the sefer called Tanya Rabasi, also from the Rishonim. He writes like this: V'shema nogu lahadlika in the shul ba'avur ha'archim ba'avur mishelihayu le'shemin lahadlik neres Chanukah. So it's the same thing as the Beis Yosef. It's because of the Archim. But if you're medayik in the lashon of Harishin, he's not saying the same thing. Because when the Beis Yosef talks about Archin, he says the takana. We're talking about a takana that the Chazal made to make kiddush in the shul for the Archim. And the same takana was made for Neres Chanukah, according to that reason. The Tanya Rabasi doesn't talk about a takana. V'shema nohagu. Why? Not because they're sleeping in the shul. Shaloya helam shemen. It happens to be that people who are traveling don't have shemen with them. You don't carry, usually when you travel, you don't carry oil with you. So it doesn't make a difference if it's in the shul? No, it doesn't make a difference if it's in the shul. Any place where there are people who don't have oil and therefore can't light the menorah, you could make the bracha.
The reason of the takana for Shabbos is not because Orchim don't have yain and don't have
right, the Archim don't have anything.
It's the same reason.
Right, they don't. But there was a takana, a special takana for Archim because they're staying in the shul. There's no other place for them to light. Where should they light? They're in the shul. But here it's because if you're an eirach b'pashtus, you don't have shemen. But he doesn't even use the word takana. He says nahagu. There's such a minig, and if that minig could be extended to any place, any public place. So according to the Tanya Rabasi, there's a basis to say that you would make the bracha even if it's not in the shul, in any public place. There's another reason of the kolbei. This is the fourth reason. Gam kihu hidur mitzvah upirsum hanes. This seems to be what the Mechaber says. It's in Persum Nisa. He calls it the Hidur Mitzvah Pirsum Hanes. So according to that, obviously, if you light in a public place, there's Pirsum, Adrabah, much more than in a shul. If you go to places where the shluchim are, they can have thousands of people, hundreds of people. The reason is the kolbei. It's another reason that the kolbei gives. Kolbei gives 3 reasons. This is the second reason. That it's in order to be mefarsim the nes. It's a hidur mitzvah. In other words, even though you were mekayim the mitzvah already in your home, but you want to be mefarsim the nes. And that's the whole basis of the Rebbe's takana of public menorahs. Why did the Rebbe masakin public menorahs? The Rebbe in a sikha acknowledges that you shouldn't be yaitza with that. You should tell people to go home and light the menorah. That's like the Rama. Not that you can't be yaitza. The Rebbe doesn't say you can't be yaitza, as far as I can remember. But you shouldn't be yaitza. You should light the menorah at home. But for people who are not shaykh to light the menorah at home, who don't know how to light and not willing to light, it's adirab. It's the pirsum hanes would be even greater to light in a public place. And you should, according to this reason of the kolbei and the mechaber, you should definitely make a bracha. Even if you're not miyaytza the mitzvah, but this pirsum hanes, this pirsum nisa. Yes?
Could be this reason of the kolbei is just as name added to the first thing that there is a takana. So also we have, he says gam, also we have pirsum nisa, but it's not that if you only
the first reason is Yemaitzi, to be Maitzi people, Deichavasan. The people is not any Baki Bein Zaras. In addition, he says, it's a thing for everyone. It's adds Persuminisa, it's a Hidr mitzvah. And you can make a bracha on the Hidr mitzvah, which is an issue unto itself, making a bracha on the Hidr mitzvah. We'll soon talk about that. Then there's a fifth reason, the Rivash. And he says, Bizman hazeh ein madlikin b'chutz, lachin madlikin b'beis hakneses. But he says you're not yaitze. In other words, the ikar takana of lighting the menorah is to light it outside. Pesach beisim b'chutz. Nowadays we don't do that. Why was it nisbatel? Because of the goyim, because of the weather. There are different reasons given. But l'peil, we don't light the menorah outside. Although in Eretz Yisrael they restored that in some places. But our minig is to light the menorah inside. And since we don't have the ikar takana of lighting the menorah outside, so when you light in the shul, it's called lighting it outside, even though the shul is still inside. Now this sounds a little bit like the reason of Pesumei Nisa, like the reason of the kolbei, but it's a little different. It's stronger than the kolbei. The kolbei says it's a hidr mitzvah. All the Mekayim the mitzvah, it was Pesumei Nisa, but you're adding on to Pesumei Nisa. It's a hidr. And even on the hidr you can make a bracha. According to the Rivash, it seems that you're missing something in the ikar takana of hadlakas ner Chanukah. The ikar takana was to do it b'bachutz, and we are compromising in that. We're not doing it b'bachutz. So how do we rectify that? How do we correct that? By doing it b'chutz, outside of your house in the shul. So the Rivash is similar to the second reason of the kolbei, but even stronger. And therefore, I would say you should certainly make a bracha when you do it in a public place if it's outside. Madach, if it's in a shul, it's considered to be a correction of the problem that you're not doing it outside. How much more so if you're mamish outside in front of thousands of people, you should certainly make the bracha. You can see I have a bias over here, going in one direction, but it seems more reasons dictate that you should make the bracha. Then there's the third reason of the kolbei, which is the sixth reason, Zeichel HaMikdash. Zeichel HaMikdash. The base of Mikdash is lit the menorah, so we light the menorah also in a place that's a Mikdash Mi'at, Zeichel HaMikdash. According to that, we wouldn't do it in a Makom Tzibur because it's not Zeichel HaMikdash. Mikdash means a Mikdash Mi'at. This idea of Zeichel HaMikdash has its marker in other Rishonim also. What's the reason that we asel ishtamash la'era? So Rishonim explain because it's like the Beis HaMikdash. It's like the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash. You're not allowed to use it for anything else. There's a din of Me'ilah. So here also, it's a Zeichel HaMikdash where the Chachamim made it aser to have any hana from it. One could say, this is Stam Pupula Bialma, the famous Kasha of the Beis Yosef, about which there are hundreds of answers. Why do we light the menorah? Why is it 8 days? Chanukah is 8 days. When the nest was only 7, they had enough oil for the first day. So Yesh Leimer B'derech Hefsher, that the first night, the takana was to light the menorah Zeichel HaMikdash. That the mila of the menorah and the Beis HaMikdash should transfer to your home. So you do it in the first night, that's the emphasis, the Zeichel HaMikdash. And the other nights is for the nest. Al Kol Panim, if it's Zeichel HaMikdash, it doesn't apply outside of the Beis HaKnesses. So to sikum of all this, according to the first reason that it's to be Maitzi Misha Eine Baki, according to the third reason that it's to those people who don't have shemen, Wahadik Neres Chanukah. According to the fourth reason, that it's to be mefarsim the nes, and the fifth reason that it should be done outside because we miss doing it outside. According to those, so 4 reasons. According to those 4 reasons, there's no reason to be mechalak between a Beis HaKnesses and a Makom Tzibur. The only thing is, according to 2 of the reasons, whether it's Zeichel HaMikdash or it's a takana for those orchim who sleep in the shul, then it only applies to a Beis HaKnesses. But then there's a little problem. The Rivash, who gives the reason we're not doing it outside. We're not mekayim the inyan of doing it in Pesach Beis and B'chutz. So we have to correct that by doing it in the Beis HaKnesses. The Rivash writes that we make a bracha. Why? He writes because shemevarchen al minig. There's such a minig, and there's a din that you could be. There's a whole shakla b'tari about what minhagim where we can make a bracha. We don't make a bracha on the minig neviim. We make a bracha on Hallel or Rosh Chodesh. The machlek is if you make a bracha or not. But some minhagim, and it's a separate sugya I'm not going to go into, the Rivash says you do make a bracha even on a minig, especially a minig that's connected to a halacha. So it's mashma that if there's no minig, if that wouldn't be the minig, you couldn't make a bracha on a shul. So according to that, since there's no minig to light menorahs in public places, although now it is a minig, but it was never originally a minig. The minig developed in a shul, not in other places. Then you still shouldn't make a bracha. What's taka the reason that you couldn't make a bracha if not for the minig? Because how can you make a bracha on doing something that's not the ikra mitzvah? It's only pirsam hanes. It's only a hidur of the mitzvah. How can you make a bracha on the hidur? So the truth is, the Alter Rebbe says you could. In Hilchos Shabbos, famous Kunter Sachen, Simrei Samar Gimel, Kunter Sachen Hey, the Alter Rebbe explains that we make a bracha when we're mahadrin. We add on our neiros and we make a bracha for the mahadrin. Says that you could make, because there's this inyan of Persuma Nisa, you can make a bracha. So we have to say that the Ikar Takana was to light in your house. So then you can make a bracha even if it's only Persuma Nisa. But in the Beis HaKnesses, that's not the place of the Ikar Takana. The Rivash holds you can't make a bracha unless there would be a minig. The Kolbei, from the Kolbei it's mashma, that he's mashma that you are Yaitze in the Beis HaKnesses. He doesn't mention anything about a minig. There is a minig, there is no minig. Because the Rivash the Kolbei holds that Pirsam Hanes is not an extra mitzvah on the mitzvah hadlaka. It's the Iker Hagdara of Neres Chanukah. There's a chakira about the din of Pesuma Nisa by Neres Chanukah. Is it a Tanai in the Hadlakas Haneres? That when you madlik Haneres, it has to be Pesuma Nisa. If it's no Pesuma Nisa, you weren't Mekayim the Iker mitzvah of Hadlaka. Or is it a separate inyan? There are two dinim. The Gemara in Megillah, the Gab in Megillah says there are two dinim in Megillah. There's the mitzvah of Kriya and the mitzvah of Pesuma Nisa. The Rogachover emphasizes that. There are two separate inyan, two separate chiyuvim. So the question is asked by the recent Achreinim, what is the din by Chanukah? Is Pesuma Nisa a chelik in the mitzvah, or it's a davar neisaf? The Rebbe in Lekutei Sichos Chelik Gimel says that it's a davar neisaf. That the mitzvah of Neres Chanukah is separate from Pesuma Nisa. It has to be royal Pesuma Nisa, but it doesn't have to actually have Pesuma Nisa. The truth is, the Rebbe in other places seems to say the opposite. In Teres Menachem, Tavshem Mem Hey, the Rebbe makes a chiluk between Neres Chanukah and Neres HaMikdash. In the Beis HaMikdash, there would be Madlik Meba'id Yaim, Neres Chanukah, the Madlik Mshatishka Chama. What's the reason? Ner Chanukah is Ikrei Pesuma Nisa. And the raya is that you can't be Madlik before Shkiyas HaChama, or because there's no Pesuma Nisa. So the Rebbe seems to be saying that Pesuma Nisa is an inyan Ikri in the Hadlakas HaMenorah. So there's no steer in the Rebbe's Sichos because the Rebbe is going according to two different shittas. There's a machlekes of the Rambam and the Rashba. The Gemara gives the shir Achatichla Rigla the Tamridai. The shir is until then. What about later? So the machlekes of the Rambam and the Rashba. That according to the Rashba, you could light all night, even there's no Pesuma Nisa, and you could light before the Shkia. And we follow that. But the Rambam says no. Once the Zman goes by, you can't light the menorah. So the machlekes is totally in this chakira. If Pesumah Nisa is a chelik in the mitzvah of Adlakas menorah, or it's a davar neisav. So we could say that the machlokes between the Rivash and the Kolbai, whether you can make a bracha, if not for the minig, is totally in that. If the Pesumah Nisa is a separate inyan, if it's a separate inyan, you can't make a bracha on it. But if it's a chelik in the mitzvah, then you could make a bracha on it. At any rate, the problem remains that according to the Rivash, it has to be a minig. So I think the answer to that is very simple. It's not a stira. It's not a minig chadash to light in a makam tzibur. It's the same minig of hadlaka bebeis haknesses. In those days, if you wanted to light a menorah b'makam tziburi, where could the Jews congregate? B'pashtas, in a shul. That's the only place where Jews can get together. They can't go outside in a public arena and light the menorah. So the shul is a public place, and that's why they were masakin to light the menorah in the Beis HaKnesses. That's the Pesumah Nisa. So that same minig, it's not a separate minig, it's to light them in all public places. So again, according to most of the reasons, there's a strong svara to say that you should make a bracha. Now, what is the Rebbe's shita about this? It's not clear. The Rebbe never spoke about it beferish, and there are people who say that the Rebbe obviously holds that you shouldn't make the bracha. Why? Because the Rebbe never said to make the bracha. I think that's a diuk shel shtus. Because does the Rebbe have to tell us to make a bracha on lighting the menorah? B'pashtus, you light the menorah, you do it with a bracha. And moreover, on the satellite, when they had the satellite lighting of the menorah, that people saw the Rebbe answering amen to the brachas that were made. So it's obvious that if the Rebbe held that it was a bracha l'batola, the Rebbe would have said something. So some people say, no, the Rebbe didn't mix into gabois. But medvar mamurim, when you're talking about minhagim of Beis HaKnesses, the Rebbe let the gaboim run the Beis HaKnesses. But when it comes to a public chilul Hashem by brachas l'batola, by thousands of Yidden all over the world, and the Rebbe doesn't say anything about it, fakir, that's the raya that the Rebbe held that the brach is perfectly all right. There's nothing wrong with the bracha.
The kaisel like a shul, no?
What?
The kaisel like a shul.
The kaisel is one place, but they lit by the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower is not yet a shul. Maisa Mashiach will turn into a shul, but right now it's not. And the Rebbe accepted it. So I think it's clear that the Rebbe's shita is that you could make the bracha, and the basis for that is that according to most of the reasons would dictate that you do make a bracha.
You consider the minute that you do it, the timing is by day after mincha,
Yeah.
not by night. But the ikar tal that we go with today is because of the mikdash, and we're following the mikdash and Shibin Apratim that it says we put the menorah in Darim.
We're not shayla that reason.
Isn't lighting by day more of an emulation of?
Okay, that's a very good ha'ara.
Lighting by night is maybe those other minhagim, those other timing that you're quoting sound like they were talking about the nighttime to be mighty people.
Yeah, but it's interesting. But most of the public lightings were at night.
Right. So
But if you're saying that if you light early, that would be ikr mitzad zeichel hamigdash. In which case you couldn't make a bracha. Okay, it's a good ha'ara. I didn't think of it. So Hanach lahem liyisrael shemeinu neviim and bnei neviim. What does it say? What? I'm supposed to bring tonight. I have to prepare something. Interesting, there's a Blavik talks about Yitzis Kislev. And what's Yitzis Kislev? The Alter Rebbe, Shnei Er. So he says that the Shnei Er is Er Makif and Er Pnimi. but what is the connection to Yud Tes Kislev? The Rebbe always finds a connection to the day. So he says as follows: there's a pasuk in Iyov, and I can't remember the exact lashon of the pasuk, but the word Kislev comes from a lashon that means bitachon, and bitachon itself is the idea of bitachon as well. So you have two lashonos in Iyov that talk about bitachon. There it says if people go away from the Eibishter, so then they will have their kislein, their trust will not materialize, and their bitachon will turn like a spider web. So he says they're talking about two types of bitachon. There's a bitachon of makif harachaik, when something is distant, but it still protects you. And then there's a bitachon that comes from dveikus, that you're attached to something that protects you. And the Alter Rebbe is shnei is both types of eiris. And when I saw this, I realized that, when we sing on Yitzhak Kislev, Pada B'Shalom, we finish off Ani Eftach Bach, and it sounds like that's the main part of the whole kapitel that we sing. We keep on repeating Ani Eftach, but what's the connection of Eftach? So, according to the Blavik, it's very well connected because, by the way, and Yud Tes is Betach, is Yud Ches, is Yud Tes. Beis Tes Ches is 19. So Yud Tes Kislev is both. Kislev is the lower level of bitachon, the inyan of makif, and Yud Tes is the inyan pnimi. And the Alter Rebbe was both, makif and pnimi. What does it mean in simple Asius? There are two drachim how a person could feel protected. There's like in Polish Chassidus, Chagas Chassidus, it's derech makif. You're in an environment of the tzaddik and the holy place, and so you feel protected. You feel the Eibishter's protection around you. But when you learn Chabad Chassidus, besides the protection that you feel from the Rachaik, there's also a kiruv pnimi. The Rebbe's connection to us is not just merachaik. It's a pnimizdik connection, and that's when the eftach bach goes on the second and higher level of bitachon. So the Eibusha should help that we should have our bitachon in Bias HaMashiach, and this galus of Mashiach, taken from Miyad Mamish, should not get weaker. Yitzhak Kislev is a time to strengthen that bitachon. Okay? I'll leave the safer here if anyone wants to shlug it out.